Welcome to the Blockchain Blueprint. Today, I've got a very special guest with me because he is representative of the oldest crypto nation currency in the world, and that, my friends, is Scotcoin. Joining me today is Temple Melville from Scotcoin. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm delighted to have made your acquaintance.
No problem at all. So to open up, can you give us a brief lowdown of yourself and Scotcoin? And I believe you also purchased the rights a number of years ago, if that's correct.
Yes. I'll give you a little bit about myself to start with. I studied economics and mathematics at the LSE in London many years ago. In fact, while I was there, it was mostly shut because there was a lot of student unrest and so on. And I've always maintained they only gave me a degree because they couldn't see me on any of the video footage of what was going on. But anyway, so I got very interested in cryptocurrency, not quite at the start, but very nearly at the start, about late 2011, early 2012. And I freely admit that I bought Bitcoin, and I freely admit that I sold it at entirely the wrong time. And I suppose everybody else did just about the same, really. So moving on to what happened with Scotcoin. Scotcoin was founded by a chap called Derek Nisbet. Derek Nisbet was an IT contractor, very interested in Scotland as a country. And he decided that should the referendum be won in 2014, that was in Scotland, Scotland would need a currency with which to trade. We wouldn't be allowed to use the pound possibly and all sorts of things. So he set up Scotcoin. And of course, what happened was he was just a one-man band. And what happened was the referendum was lost. He kind of lost interest. And so early 2015, we started talking to him about him selling out because he obviously didn't want to take it any further. We were very keen on a Scottish cryptocurrency. And so late 2015, early 2016, myself and two business partners bought him out in the IP and the coin and all the rest of it. So we've been working on all sorts of things since then.
You mentioned you've worked through all sorts of things just now, so let's just follow on. What have you been working on thus far?
Okay, well, when we for lack of a better expression, bought out Scotcoin originally, we kind of set forward in motion various things that we thought needed to happen. One of the things was we needed to increase adoption. We had to have more people using it, more people with coin in their wallet. So we started to do that. We did meetups, which were very successful. We had a proper website, all sorts of other things like that. But more importantly, what was quite clear to us was that there was no way that governments and banks and all the rest of it were going to allow people to just transfer millions of dollars and pounds and euros all over the place without knowing where it came from, who it was going to, whether tax had been paid on it, all that sort of thing. And so we set out on a path to have a coin whereby we would know that in every case. Now, actually, things have changed slightly because one of the things that happened was that every exchange has now got to the point where you have to be KYC and AML. KYC is know your customer, AML is anti-money laundering. So you can't actually get onto an exchange to trade without doing that. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that at all. There are, of course, still people who can trade peer-to-peer. You don't have to do anything. If I know you, you can say to me, I'll sell you this and I'll buy that, whatever. And that's fine. So anyway, so we have had two false starts in terms of creating the new coin we wanted. And we have, I'm glad to say we're now at the point where we effectively have the new coin. We have it in test, we have it working. We're very pleased about that because it's taken us a long time. And we also, the only thing we're really waiting for is a process that we need to get organized for what we call migration, because there have been 3 versions, or there will be 3 versions of Scotcoin. The first, which we call V1, version 1, was the one created by Derek Nesbitt. Now, he, being a one-man band and so on, he found himself subject to a lot of hack attacks and one thing and another. And so he moved the whole thing over in the early days of 2015 onto the counterparty token. Now, the counterparty token is, in fact, a Bitcoin blockchain, and it's very secure and all the rest of it. And it meant that he didn't really have to do anything else, which was really good. And that was what we call V2, and is the version we're still on at the moment. But as I say, we're very, very, very close to going to V3. But we have to bring all the people who have V2, and of whom there are about 4,000 or so now, onto our V3 platform. And that migration has to be handled professionally and properly and securely. And that's what we're working on at the moment.
You mentioned that the main purpose of Scotcoin was that it's a national currency. Do you see it as being a thing that could eventually replace the Scottish pound, for instance?
Well, I'm not one of the people who thinks that cryptocurrency and fiat currency are an either or. Fiat's just pounds, dollars, euros, whatever. Excuse me. I've long believed that they will exist side by side. Crypto has a lot of very specific characteristics that are really good, not least of which is the cost of transmission. I always use this example. If you want to send £1 million to South America or Africa or Australia or anywhere, it's going to cost you between £20,000 and £30,000. Now, you can send £1 million in cryptocurrency for less than 50p. So you've got a lot of space to, make up costs and one thing or another within those figures. The other thing that's really good about cryptocurrencies is you can target it. So just in the simplest terms, supposing you said, well, I want to give money to people who are going to dig wells in Africa, you can give that money directly to the people who are going to dig the wells, which means you haven't got charities creaming off something. You haven't got anybody else creaming off anything because they can't cash it in. It can only be cashed in by the people you have specified can cash it in. And that particularly applies with smart contracts, which is what the new coin is going to be. It's an ERC20 token, which means that it works on a smart contract, and that's how it will work.
Fantastic. I've seen interviews and I've seen use cases before where you want it. There's a very strong philanthropic side to Scotcoin. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. Well, it really stems from the fact that we all believe, the people who are involved are all Scottish. We all believe that the people of Scotland should be better off as a whole, not one section or another section, but everyone. And in order to do that, we have what we call our idea of quantitative easing from the ground up. Now, you'll have noticed over all this COVID thing that we've got this huge quantitative easing from the top down. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure that very much of that is actually going to trickle into hands that are less well off. I mean, we saw it in 2008. There was massive, massive amounts of money printed then. It got into the banks because the banks had made such a mess of everything. They were given the money to get themselves out of trouble. But they didn't really sort of go ahead and give lots of other people money. They just stayed there. So this time round, we have no idea whether that's going to happen again, but we probably think that it's unlikely that the worst off in society will benefit. Now, that being the case, we at Scotcoin can actually do something about that. We can donate coin to them. Now, okay, yes, there's a little bit of technical stuff they have to go through, but most people have got a phone that works with all these things nowadays. We're going to have partners who are in the position of being able to accept Scotcoin. A very good example is like sports clothes and so on, anoraks and what have you. So if you're a less well-off person and you need to get a new anorak, or you need new, I don't know, whatever it could be, fleece or something, you'll be able to go and get that with Scotcoin. And that has to be a good thing. And that means that some people who perhaps wouldn't be able to afford these things will be able to afford them. And that's just one aspect of it. We're also very into homelessness. We have partnerships with two charities, one called Social Bite, and the other one is called it's not called Just Eat. I keep calling it Just Eat. It's Eat Up. It's called Eat Up, who distribute food to people who require it, both food banks and donation points and so on. And they, both of those charities, we work quite closely with on a variety of different projects. So that's the way we are positioned. We believe in looking after the worst off in society.
Brilliant. And it's such a worthy cause too. But getting more into the monetary side of things now, we obviously see that the financial climate at this point is looking very bleak in terms of its outlook for the foreseeable future and in 2020. So what place does cryptocurrency hold, and what in particular does Scotcoin come into all this?
Well, I think there's a kind of underlining thing here, and that is that I think most people believe that with the unbelievable sums of money that are being printed, literally, and just to take the UK for example, it's estimated we're going to increase our national debt by a third. Now, it's taken us 200 years to get it to where it is just now. And then in 1 year, we're going to increase it by a third. I mean, that is a massive amounts of money. I have a little thing I always like to say is, people say, how big is a million? And it's quite hard to sort of conceive how big a million is. But let's just say every second of the day is a pound. So how much is £1 million? Well, 1 second is £1. So a minute is £60. An hour is £3,600 and so on. Now, a million is 11 and a bit days. It's not enormous, but it's 11 and a bit days. So let us go from 1 million to 1 billion. Now, you can easily enough work it out. It comes in at 33 years or so. And if you then say, okay, well, we go up to 1 trillion, that comes in at about 32,000 years. So those are huge, huge numbers. They really are. And the expectation would have to be in that respect that the value of those printed monies are going to be less. And that's across the board. I mean, every country, America's printed already, I think, 4 trillion or 5 trillion or something. France has done the same, Germany's done the same, the EU is kind of thinking about doing it, but of course the EU won't do it the way everybody else has done it. So, we are looking at inflation coming down the line quite seriously. Now, the great thing about cryptocurrencies is that they have a finite quantity in general terms that are either in existence or will be in existence. Just to take Bitcoin as an example, there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. Never. At the moment, there's about 17.5 million or so that have been mined. Okay, we can argue about there's so many have been lost and one thing or another, but that's really irrelevant. The point is, if you own 1 Bitcoin today, when Bitcoin is finished being mined in about 2140, so it's got another 120 years of mining to go, you're still going to have 1 Bitcoin. And that 1 Bitcoin is still worth 1 Bitcoin. The problem is, if you've got $1 and you've got $1 out of making it up $10 trillion, that's pretty small. But it's even smaller if it becomes $20 trillion. And that is what's called inflation. Now, what it means is that if you've got a loaf of bread that costs £1, in 5 years' time or something, that loaf of bread may cost £2 or more. And just to give you an example, if you go back to 1900, a penny, and it was an old penny, it wasn't even a new penny, so it's like half a p. Today, that half a p is worth something like £1.11. So it's 222 times more valuable then than it is today, which is an extraordinary thing. And that is what will happen with inflation over the years. The pound, there was a chap called Harold Wilson, who was Prime Minister of the UK in the 60s, and he famously said, the pound in your pocket has not changed. Well, the short answer is the pound in your pocket has changed, and it does change, and it will change. But your Bitcoin won't change. It will still be worth the same. And when you come to buy your loaf of bread, whereas you might have to pay £2, and let's just, for the sake of argument, say it costs one Bitcoin, which it doesn't, because Bitcoin's worth a lot more than that. But if it costs one Bitcoin today, when you come to actually buy in 5 years' time or 6 years' time or whatever, it won't cost you 2 Bitcoin. It might only cost you half a Bitcoin or a quarter of Bitcoin, because, as I say, they are mildly deflationary. And that is a significant advantage that cryptocurrencies and digital currencies have over fiat currencies, particularly at this sort of time when things are so unbelievably complex. I mean, I don't know whether you probably did see the other day that the Bank of England actually has been busy selling their debt, for a negative return. So in other words, if you give them 100 quid today, in 2 years' time, they'll give you back £99. So you're not getting any interest. You're just going to lose money. But people think that's not too bad, because if we really are moving into this very difficult era, then perhaps it's better to at least keep the total value, the total amount you have the same, if not the total value.
And so you're basically paying them to hold your money for you.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Going into negative interest rates. The same thing with negative oil, like we saw.
Yeah.
Like they pay you to hold it for them.
Yeah. Well, it's happened for a long time in Switzerland. I mean, I don't know exactly, but certainly for quite a few years, you have been unable to earn interest on money that you deposit in Switzerland. They charge you for holding it. And there were periods, various places in the world where there were negative interest rates. I mean, the Dutch do it from time to time, and other people do it from time to time, purely and simply because the fear is that people are going to lose the total value of their capital with something happening, and that fear is there at the moment for sure.
And so, do you think in your forecast there'll be a very high inflation or even a hyperinflation like we're seeing in Venezuela?
That is the fear. Now, there's a lot of things can happen, of course, and believe it or not, one of the things that could happen is that the Treasury in all these countries simply say, "Hey, we owe, 10 trillion euros, dollars, whatever, but guess what? We're going to write it off, and so we won't have that." Now, that you may say, "Well, they can't do that," but hang on, they just did it not that long ago with Cyprus. I mean, they literally wrote off all the money that lots of people had in their bank accounts in Cyprus, which is, you can say, well, that's not really very fair. And I agree, it's totally unfair, but it's what the powers that be do when, they feel that things are threatened to that extent. So I'm very keen on, I'm obviously very keen on digital currencies and the fact that you have control of it. I think it's worth actually remembering that the reason that digital currencies started, it was sort of the where it was born, if you like, was in 2008, 2009. And at that time, we've got a different situation now. But at that time, banks everywhere were going completely belly up all over the place. Lots of different. Lehman Brothers is the classic example. Funnily enough, I was talking to someone just yesterday who had actually been at Lehman Brothers at that particular time, and he obviously lost his job. And he actually said it was the best thing that ever happened to him, because it meant he got out of merchant banking and got into something rather better. But anyway, that's by the by. But the point is that they were all crashing everywhere. I mean, the Bank of America was nearly bust. Goldman Sachs had to change from being a thing into a proper bank so that the Federal Reserve could actually give them money. AIG, the big insurance company, was propped up with something like $500 billion just to keep it going. Now, the Americans did it in quite a good way because they worked out that, in fact, these companies were perfectly viable. What they had was a serious liquidity problem because no one had faith in the fact that they would survive. So as long as they did survive, they were worth something. And one of the more interesting things is that Lehman Brothers has been through this very lengthy administration period and winding down period. And this has actually come out with some value. Everybody's paid off, or near enough everybody's paid off, and there will be some money left over. And that includes all the huge sums of money that, of course, the liquidators have taken as well.
And so, but despite the bleak outlook, it looks very positive for cryptocurrencies. So, can you give us a potential forecast in the short to medium term?
I was talking to somebody.
It's almost a question I hate asking, but I feel like for people, like it's almost as though I kind of have to ask in some way.
Well, I think there's several different answers to the question. The first is that I don't think, if you talk to investment professionals nowadays, there are, of course, some people who are completely against cryptocurrencies and digital currencies. But as of now, you have to regard cryptocurrencies as being an asset class. Now, what that means is that, asset classes are like stocks and shares, bonds, debt instruments, paintings, wine, art, all sorts of things like that. Those are all asset classes. And crypto has definitely become an asset class. Now, okay, it's a very small one. And if you wanted me to be honest, I would say to you, perhaps you should have 1 or 2% of your wealth, whatever that might be, in cryptos. But that might grow. That might grow. I mean, at the moment, the total value of cryptocurrencies is of the order of $270 billion, which is, around 1% or so of the entire world assets. So therefore, it makes sense to hold some of your assets in cryptocurrency. I feel quite strongly that all cryptocurrencies, I'll rephrase that, I won't say all, I'll say some cryptocurrencies are without any shadow of a doubt going to appreciate in value. I mean, the big ones everybody knows about are Ethereum, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dash, these ones. Over time, they will, without any shadow of a doubt, increase in value. I have no idea how much or how little, but they will increase in value. The other problem is there's lots and lots of what I call Mickey Mouse coins, which people have created for a variety of reasons. There was a terrible thing about 2 years ago where people were looking at how many ICOs, initial coin offerings, were actually valuable. And they came to the conclusion that more than half of all the issues during, I think it was 2018, it exist after a mere, 120 days, in other words, 4 months. And that is, a terrifying prospect. The great thing about any of these coins and so on is you should see what it's doing, B, what the technology is, C, who the advisors are, and D, what you think yourself you can afford. So if you think, hey, I've got 100 quid, put 100 quid in. Don't be persuaded, as lots of people were with one coin, to put in massive amounts of money, which unfortunately just disappeared down the drain. I mean, there have been a number of very serious frauds perpetrated with cryptocurrency, entirely because people just don't understand it. I am actually an instructor for blockchain and crypto, and I've written a book about it, which is available if you want it. You can get in touch with me. But the whole point is that a lot of these things are founded in greed and ignorance. And our job, if you like, is to actually make sure that people can still be greedy, obviously, but what we're trying to do is to avoid the ignorance. We're trying to get people to understand what's going on, why it's going on, why it's a good thing. That's quite a job, believe me.
Great. So is there anything else you'd like to add before we conclude?
No, I've very much enjoyed talking to you. I've felt very much that we've covered all the points that are relevant. As I say, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this, but if you want to get in touch with me, I'm temple@scotcoinproject.com. That's temple@scotcoinproject.com, and I will very happily send you my book.
Fantastic. Could you just finally say a bit more about your book and where they can find it?
Yeah, the thing to do is to go onto scotcoinproject.com and you will find the book there. We only do it ourselves because we obviously want to know who's buying it. It's called Bitcoin Blockchain, sorry, the other way around, Blockchain Bitcoin and What It Means to You. And we talk about how the blockchain works, how it's evolved, and we talk about some of the other things. I mean, lots of people have said things about Bitcoin, oh, it's a scam. And we show you why it's not a scam. We show you why it's, in fact, a solidly based currency. And there's lots of other things that are quite interesting. I mean, for example, you can actually predict, or it would appear you can predict, the value of Bitcoin by looking at the price of avocados. Now, that may sound absolutely ridiculous, but if you go back over the last few years, the price of Bitcoin going up and down has correlated very nicely, thank you very much, with the price of avocados in the wholesale markets. And I have no idea why that should be, but it's true. And we can talk you through all that kind of thing, which is quite interesting as well. It's not written in terribly technical or difficult terms. It's written for the layman. It's written for people to be able to access it easily and to be able to understand what it is we're actually talking about.
Temple, thank you so much for your time today. It was a really great insight on Scotcoin and also as well your knowledge, because I'm sure our viewers and subscribers are going to benefit from it enormously. So if you want to get in touch with Temple or any of his books or even the Scotcoin project, I'll put everything in the link before. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. See you soon.
Thank you so much.